I'm so excited to have my guest here with me today. His name is Jason Cattrell, a former charge nurse who worked in psychiatry and elderly care. However, he gave that up to become the carer for his mother who died 8 years later. He now works in hospice and is the host of the fascinating podcast, Everything End of Life. Jason, thanks so much for being with me today on this podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Jason, you have such a fascinating life story. Your nursing career, you're an author, theater, negotiation trainer, horse owner, culinary industry, Ukrainian host family for Ukraine, and you also have multiple pets in the house, 2 dogs, 5 cats, a tortoise, in addition to your wife and 2 kittens. Is that right?
That is correct, yeah.
It's amazing.
It's a busy house, you know.
Yeah, that's great. Can you tell us some more about your fascinating life?
Okay, well, strangely, to me, it's not fascinating. To me, it's just the way I live, you know.
Yeah.
So I grew up, we moved around a lot as children. My parents, you know, they had different jobs. But settled, my father died when I was quite young, so my mother looked after us and we settled. She started nursing herself and became a matron of what then we would call Part 3 accommodation, but is actually, you know, they'd say an old people's home, and nowadays care for the elderly. So it always changes. And so at the age of 14, I was, you know, helping ladies and gents to the toilet and back, and then calling bingo for them at the same time. So it was a strange upbringing, I guess. But when you're actually in it, you just get on with it, don't you? And then I trained as a psychiatric nurse. Then after 15, and we did psychotherapy and hypnosis psychotherapy. After 15 years, my mother got sick, so my brother's a carpenter and my sister's an artist. I was the nurse, so who got the job of looking after mum then, eh? And I looked after her for 8 years, and she was a wonderful lady and a lovely person to look after. The only time she ever got annoyed is if you stood in front of the telly, so she would just get out of the way. You know,
just get out of the way.
Just get out of the way, yeah. During that time, I did a BA in performing arts because I'm not very good at sitting still for very long, and so I did have help with carers coming in to help my mother, and putting that together with the psychiatry, I got headhunted by a friend actually called John Holmes for Frontline Training Solutions. And they teach international negotiation skills at the Central Banks of Holland, so workshops. And I became the head trainer for that for a few years, which was fascinating. You know, it's really quite, you meet some incredible people, travel to some great countries. Yeah, it was lovely. Then around the same time as my mother died, I met my wife, my now wife, because I was doing amateur dramatics for fun, and she just joined the theatre company that we were part of, and we kind of more or less instantly fell in love, and that was that, really. So she supports me in all the crazy things I do, like for instance, we were doing a Shakespeare one day, and one of the actors, you know, had a bit of a hissy fit and stormed off the stage. So she just picked up a script and just stood in for him and read.
That's great.
She's 4'8", and she was playing a 58-year-old Venetian guy, and the audience just went with it. So it's just, she's kind of got that about her. She's wonderful. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, she's an incredible life. She won't tell you that, obviously. Then after around that time, I started, I suppose it was about 10, 15 years ago, I started a biodiesel company. And it became quite obvious, really, to me quite soon that I didn't actually want to do that. But what I did enjoy doing was travelling around the Essex countryside and the Suffolk borders, just delivering cooking oil and picking up the waste and selling that on. And so that meant I could have my own business, I could look after my kids, watch them grow up, my time was my own. And I could steal recipes from chefs and try them out.
That's
So
great.
I love cooking. I love cooking. It's a fantastic thing.
That's amazing. What do you like to cook the most?
I think one of our favourites is confit duck bonbons. So sorry, we've got a visitor here. My cat.
Oh, you're fine. Oh, we got your cat. One of your cats.
This is Lola. She's deaf as a post. Oh yeah. Go on, get him again. So confit duck bonbons, foams, and chicken. There's so many different things you can do with chicken, isn't there? Chasseur, griddled, anything. I just love to cook. I love to try fine dining bits as well. Just a tip on fine dining. Most people think, I've got to be incredibly good at cooking to do fine dining. You don't. You have to be quite slow. Just do it one bit at a day. One bit in one day, the next day. Just do the elements and put them all together on one. Oh. Okay, well, my best one is just freeze everything. So if you're going to make a sauce, if you make a red wine jus, make a gallon of it and freeze it in little pots. And then you can, when you've got your steak, you can just casually say, and would anybody like a red wine jus with that? And everybody would be slightly impressed. So, tips.
That's very impressive. Yeah, I like that. I'll have to try that sometime.
Okay, so where it all went horribly wrong was when when COVID turned up, and all the restaurants got closed down. So nobody wanted any cooking oil, and I didn't want to go back into nursing. But a friend of mine said, "Well, there's some care work doing. You can just you don't have to retrain or anything. Just become a carer." I went, "Yeah, all right, I could do that." I had no idea what it was going to be. Did the interview and then suddenly realised I'd become an end-of-life carer. So, and I did 2 days and I just loved it. It was fabulous.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I find, I think that we really don't talk as much about the death aspect. And when I heard of your podcast, I'm like, this is just something that I feel like we do need to talk about. And just as we talk about life, it's so important to talk about death. And what led you to create this podcast of yours and wanting to share what you know with your audience? Okay,
well, it was a bit of a mistake, to be honest. I was doing some training. And there was a lady called Dr. Catherine Maddox. And as part of our online training, we have to look at videos and watch. And she was talking about the fact that we don't talk about death, but we don't use the word death or dying. We said, they passed on or they passed over or whatever. And I really took that completely literally and thought, no, we don't talk about death generally. We talk about, as you say, we talk about life. We talk about birth, and we get very excited when somebody has a baby. And there's a whole industry around that. There's obviously an industry around death, but it's a quiet industry, isn't it? We don't, until we actually start to look at it, or something close to us dies, or gets a terminal diagnosis, we don't really, or even ourselves, we don't really look at it. We don't talk about it. Culturally, we look the other way. And it's not surprising, is it? Because nobody wants to look at that thinking, oh my gosh, the party does actually end one day, For some people, of course, with their belief systems, it doesn't. And so this is just a part of the journey, which I'm fine with. I think that's great, So I thought, I was driving around in my van and thinking, well, I've got theatre skills. I could do a podcast. I'd never listened to a podcast by then, actually, at that time. But I'd heard about what they were, like little radio snippets or anything like. And I thought, well, how about, and I toyed with the ideas of a few different titles. Like, one I came up with was Death, Dying and Deliveries. And I thought, no, that's going to get the wrong idea altogether, isn't it? People are going to start thinking I'm talking about birth deliveries. No.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, with the deliveries.
Delivering cooking oil and just chatting with people in my van.
Oh, yeah.
and interviewing people as I'm driving around. And then I thought, I don't think the police would be too chuffed if I was driving around interviewing people. I think they might find that a road safety problem. So then I was just writing things down and putting. We have this way of writing. We just put EOL, very EOL. This patient is very EOL. So they're getting close to dying, but we just put EOL. And I thought, well, that's what I need to talk about. Everything end of life, and that's how the title came about, as a shorthand for they're very close to dying, our patients. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I want to talk about. It's everything end of life. So it's not just about dying specifically, but about all of those processes leading up to when we die. So we talk with a clinical nurse specialist about what those last 4 weeks look like, because whilst we die in different way from different illnesses, quite often there's that same pattern of us, becoming more and more sleepy, eating less and less, drinking less and less, and eventually stopping, as it were. And then I thought, well, do you know what? There's so much. Other people started getting excited about the idea. There's so much to talk about. So we got a guy called Lee Joshak from Freedom Funerals, and he started to explain that you don't have to have that very Victorian idea of a funeral with everybody in black coats and the guys holding the coffin and going into the chapel of rest. You can do whatever you want. You can go in there and have a party if you want. And people have. I mean, when my sister died, we started the funeral session music off with what was the song? It was "Bring Me Sunshine." Bring Me Sunshine. And it was a really jolly, sort of song. Of course, we're all in tears, but that's not the point. But so he talked, and he's a fascinating guy. He won't thank me for telling you, but he had a child that lost their hamster. Not lost it, it died. And so he made a really little small coffin for it, and he put it on the back of the hearse, and he did the whole procession thing gave it a funeral. All for nothing, So lovely fella. And then I now work for a hospice, but for all of my career, I never knew what hospices did. And so I get Dr. Karen Chumley to come and talk about what hospices are, what they offer, the services. They're mostly charities, and everyone's different. Every hospice is slightly different. They offer more or less the same service, but in a different way, because they grow organically to their area as a charity. And, so whilst my podcast is not specifically about St. Helena Hospice, it's on my doorstep, so it's kind of handy to get people to interview from there.
Sure.
But then I've just met a minister who was in Bosnia during the war, and his job was to do workshops with soldiers, the young soldiers, the 18, 20 years old, who were going to go into battle about, how to come to terms with death, because their friends might die in war, they might die, how they prepared their relatives. So there's another fascinating thing. That's an interview that's going to be coming up.
Okay.
So when I talk about everything end of life, it really is everything end of life. There's another interesting thing culturally. It's very cultural specific here. Because in 3 years of working, I'd only met 2 black people as patients. No Chinese people, no Muslims, no Jewish people. And I was beginning a bit thinking everybody else is immortal, but clearly not. I was having a chat with a guy who was from Uganda, and a taxi driver, and I said to him, how comes we never see black people in the hospices? And he said, well, it's because we've got family. We've got extended family. I've got 10 brothers and sisters, he says, and we've all got cousins, and we all kind of look after ourselves in our own cultural way. And I thought, wow, that's something we've got to talk about. So I get having cultural leaders. One of my friends is Salma Ahmed. She's a Muslim, and she's going to be coming on talking about how Muslims approach end-of-life care. And so, it's a fascinating area, not just about death.
That is really fascinating.
Yeah.
I feel like we do need to educate ourselves on this. Like you're saying, everything end of life. And it is an important conversation to have and to see how culturally things are different. And I remember listening to that episode with the Freedom Funeral, talking about the forest and people are doing that more. Like, can you tell us about that? I thought that was really interesting because I find the forest to be so spiritual.
I mean, I just love that. That's the way I want to be buried, to be honest. Covered in mycelium, turned into mushrooms. I just love that idea. So you can get buried, but if you want to do it the green way, if you like, in a wicker coffin, or in a pod, which itself disintegrates as quickly as you do, and then they'll plant a tree on top of you. So your body will feed the roots of that tree, as it were. And that's just a really beautiful way to go. My wife, she believes that we are largely energy. And so she kind of thinks, I'm not sure where the energy goes when we die. And I said, well, hopefully into a tree for me or for her. So, yeah, it is. And there's also so many different ways people are approaching how they, instead of just being buried or cremated, there's that. I don't know if you remember, we talked about also literally being melted down and turned into water. So I don't know how chemically that works. I think it's sodium hydroxide, but which is interesting because I used to use that in making biodiesel. So how peculiar.
Wow. Yeah, it's I feel like it really does bring the world into perspective when you think about how we're all related and united, and we all have different beliefs and everything, but there's just so much that we have in common with this earth and with the world. And now, as far as the topics and things that people want to bring up in their last few months or weeks of life, what do you feel like are important things that they want to talk about, what we should talk about? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a really interesting point, is that unless we actually do talk about it, then the thing that we notice when we go into people's homes mostly that people are is unprepared. They this thing has kind of happened to them, and they don't really want to talk about it. So it's kind of great when we can have early conversations. So when they have a diagnosis, maybe at the beginning, and say instead of somebody saying, "Well, I'm afraid you've got cancer," there's all these treatments we can give you, etc. Is round about that time to start to introduce the idea of my care choices. So we have a my care choices register here, which tells where people record how they want their last few weeks to go, how they want their how they want their death, what their death to look like. So we aim for people not just to have a good death, but to have a beautiful death. See, I was really lucky with my mother, for instance. She died at home, but with all the family around her. And I'd had time to have a shower, put on a nice shirt, gather the family around. We all sat down, and within about 10 minutes, we watched her last heartbeat. That was a beautiful death. Okay. But before then, we'd had lots of time we knew she was going to pass away, but we had lots of time to talk about all the things that she'd done in her life. So all the memories, all the music, all the fun stuff. And it's that kind of thing I think we should be, if you're bedbound, for instance, talking about your life and celebrating your life. A very interesting phenomena, which I think has probably happened throughout centuries, but it's becoming more popular now, is to have a living funeral. So instead of everybody gathering to celebrate your death after you died, they come together before you die, and they talk with you and say how much they love you and how much fun you've been, and celebrate your life properly with you. So I think that's an interesting change around now. And just enjoying those, from the moment we can see the end, filling your time with, or helping to fill someone's time with things that they really enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's the same. Some people just want to, hide away and they find it all very depressing. Some people don't. They want to celebrate. We had one chap who was amazing. He had this huge party where they had jugglers, fire eaters, ice cream vans, burger vans, and he was in his bed in the middle of the whole of this music kind of festival, as it were. And just for people who wanted to come and say goodbye to him. And he took loads of photos. And the first time I met him, he just regaled me with all these photos. And we got on really well and just chatted away for probably a good hour. I was supposed to be nursing him, but we didn't do any nursing that day. We just chatted about how wonderful what a wonderful time he'd had during that time.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And that reminds me of, we had a friend pass away recently, and I wanted to talk with my husband about, kind of like made me be like, well, we need to talk more about this. And when we went out, we had like a date night that I'm like, let's talk about, just the logistics and everything. But when, I don't know, I just wasn't really in the mood to talk serious stuff. I wanted to talk more about our friend, and what the conversation kind of evolved into was, we should just talk about stories of our lives. So people remember what happened in your childhood, what happened with, in my friend's life, but also what happened in your childhood, what happened in my childhood. And let me write that down so we can share these stories together. 'Cause that is so much of, celebrating our lives and having that kind of, those conversations.
It's a brilliant thing that you just talked about there, because it's what we should, as couples, as families, as people, be doing just generally, is making more of, so what was your life like before I met you, and celebrating all those strange and silly things that we do, and even some of the sad times that we've had and how we've got through them and supported each other. It's that brilliant thing of actually living for the now. That's the most important thing. So I've written a book which describes my first 2 days, my first 15 visits in a hospice, and I'll be publishing it shortly. It's called The Last Kiss, and in it, you'll see sorts of examples of exactly that. People celebrating the last few moments, sometimes, of their lives. So
that'll be very interesting. Yeah, for sure. Let us know, because that'll be really interesting to read. I think it reminds me of a quote that I first saw it in Gretchen Rubin's book, but she did a lot of research on quotes, and this one came from William Edward Hartpole Lecky, which is quite a name. But I always remembered it, though, ever since I saw it. And he says, there are times in the lives of most of us when we would have given all the world to be as we were but yesterday, though that yesterday had passed over us unappreciated and unenjoyed. So it just really reminds me of living in the present, embracing the present. And it can be so monotonous, life sometimes, but it's amazing to be alive and to be breathing and being in the here and now.
I mean, the chances of us being here, sitting here, having this conversation on a rock that is hurtling through space thousands of miles an hour with nothing else around it. I mean, how unlikely is that? And yet here we are. And I think it is carpe diem, seize the moment. It should be for everyone. And my wife, we were just driving in the van the other day, because every Friday she takes a day off and she comes with me, and we drive around Essex and Suffolk and chat with restaurateurs, and I deliver their cooking oil, and we just have a laugh. And she just turned to me and she said, I feel so lucky, that we've got each other, and we can afford food, even when we couldn't. There have been times when it's been a bit tough, I can tell you. We haven't been able to, afford very much, but now we're kind of okay. And we've got this beautiful countryside around us. We've got red kites above us. We've got sheep and horses and so much wildlife. We saw a badger a little while ago, which was incredible. So we're just driving around, and she just wanted to say, I'm so lucky, that we've got each other as a couple. I don't think you need to be a couple to just take stock of your life and go, actually, do you know what? 200 years ago, they never knew what a washing machine was, you know? So and you've got a laundrette. So, yeah, great. It's crazy, isn't it? We've got to take these moments where we just really appreciate what we've got. But I think that's why we've got so many animals and well, lots of friends, really. Maybe I can't stop talking usually.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think, and animals really do. I mean, like, I feel like when I'm watching nature and all of that, I know you mentioned red kites. You said you had some information about that's a bird. Is that right? Red kites?
Yeah, they. It's quite a large bird. It's about the size of a buzzard,
Okay.
but they died out around here, and they just reintroduced them a few years ago, and they're doing really well. And interestingly, when my father-in-law died, I'd nursed him for about 5 weeks. It was the beginning of the year. And he passed away. And when they were taking his body out, I was stood outside, and my wife was accompanying him downstairs, and with the undertakers, who were really nice, really beautiful people. They left a rose on his bed, made his bed, left a rose on it. And when I looked up, there was a red kite circling above the house. And I'd never seen a red kite in Sudbury ever before. You know, they're not there. And my wife has taken that as, that because he used to be a pilot, her dad. And so she's taken that as every time she sees a red kite, so she sees him, which is lovely.
That's beautiful. That
Yeah.
reminds me of my grandpa when he passed away. It was when my youngest, she was just born, and he wasn't able to meet her. And I remember like stepping outside. It was in the summertime, and I saw a really bright star. It ended up being, I believe it was Jupiter. But I just really felt like his presence and meeting my daughter. And so I told my other two kids about that moment. And still to this day, like, whenever I see that planet in the sky, like, I think of him watching over.
Yeah.
When we were in the hospital, I saw that very brightly. I'm like, oh, well, there's Grandpa watching over us. And my daughter, my older one, she'll like talk with my son about, oh, there's great Grandpa, and he's looking at us right now. And
Yeah.
I love those type of, just
It is lovely,
symbols.
And
Yeah,
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 even if it's factually incorrect, which I don't know. I mean, who can tell? But it's beautiful just to think that's actually happening. I don't often
yes,
believe in what people believe in, but I do believe in the power of belief. That, that is an amazing thing.
yes. I love that because, yeah, everyone does have their own beliefs, but
Yeah.
there is the power. There's such a power in belief. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
that's
yeah,
beautiful.
absolutely.
Yeah. Um, Now, what can we do? I mean, we talked a little bit about this already, but like as far as creating a legacy and all, like I know for me, like I'm on a mission to like write my life story for my kids and all of that. Like I really want them to, you know, um, be able to read something. Do people do writing, or what kind of legacies? I mean, also just with the way we teach our kids, the way we interact with others, spreading love. Um, what do people talk about with their legacies?
Okay, so we're in this incredible time where we've got video,
Yeah.
and I had this one person. It was really funny. He made a video where he had it in the chapel of rest, and he was talking to everybody who was watching his body going, off to be cremated, and he was telling people off and saying, don't you be sitting there crying, go out there and really enjoy your life. And he was giving little life lessons that he'd learned on this little video. And I think that's a lovely thing to do. We've got technology, so you record yourself singing. If you love singing, if you love karaoke, record that for your kids. My father, it's gone in. Nobody knows where it is now, but they had reel-to-reel cassettes. Okay, so they had two big reels and they were with a microphone, and he recorded the Silver Snaffle. So a little story that he made up about us three kids uh, going down a country lane through a fog and meeting these magical talking horses. And it was all about us learning to ride and them teaching us how to ride and talking to us and falling off the horse and ending up underneath it. And, and it was beautiful. And I remember that vividly. And that's the only time I can remember his voice. It was from Liverpool. I mean, very Liverpudlian voice. So, and having that memory, even though I don't have the tape, I can still remember that. I think that's beautiful. Having actual physical manifestations of your folks, can probably bring you to tears, but at the same time, you're there, you can appreciate them, and we've got lots of things like that people can do. You might not be a great singer, you might not be a great storyteller or a great sculptor, but you can talk, and you can, like you were saying earlier, when you were remembering your childhood and the things that you do, you can talk about that on video, and leave messages for your kids, and, jokes, make them laugh, lots of things. I think there's so many different ways of celebrating. When I'm gone, I've recorded a couple of songs. I'm not a great singer, so but they can, they can play those back and go, oh my God, Daddy was really not a great singer, was it? Please listen to that. So yeah, there's lots. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying, make memories. That's the thing. Make memories real. Make them physical. Sculptures, if you want to, painting. Whatever floats your boat. Do it with the kids.
That's wonderful. I think those are great ideas. And I know, like with my grandma, who was very special to me, I wrote a lot about her in my writings, like what I remember. And it wasn't necessarily physical what she did, but it was in a way was she smiled. Like there was a very just like her smile I remember so much, and it's one that's like burned in my memory. So when I think of her, I smile like her with my kids, with my family, and I feel like in a way that honors her legacy. And
pass that smile on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's and I know recently like with our we had a few friends pass away recently, like with cancer and all, where it's hard to talk about. Sometimes I feel like, they're still on my phone, and I try to, you think, oh, I can call them, but they're not there. Where are they? And when I took a walk kind of shortly after, it was up in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin, like, has some beautiful churches on hills, and they all like reach tall to the sky. And I know in Europe, so many cathedrals that reach so high. But at the same time, it made me think, like, gosh, like, is everyone up above us, or are they more around us, or maybe both? Like, but like, it makes me think of, like, with one of my favorite composers as a musician is Johann Sebastian Bach, and his I really love his cello piece. I think it's G major, his cello piece in G major. Most people have heard of it, but like when he says that at a performance, like, God is around us in the music. He was very religious, and it makes me think of, like, when I'm hearing that cello piece, it really is like I'm inhaling and exhaling, like there's music all around me. It's not necessarily above me. I don't know. It just got me thinking about how there's, with water can be a gas, or like, it could be steam, it can be liquid, or it can be ice. Like there's different forms. And yeah, that's just like was some of my thoughts, I would say, like during the last few years.
Just a little hint. I think there's actually a society of people who appreciate Bach. Certainly, there's one in England. So you're part of a club. Yeah, you should look it up.
I should look it up. Yes, he's my favorite composer. I mean,
and I think you're right. Certainly, when you're listening to music, and that is one of those things that is evocative. My daughter loves to sing every Christmas The Fairy Tale of New York by the Pogues. I don't know if you know this song, but it has some swearing in it, and I think she only likes singing it because it's got some swearing in it. But it's a two-person, you know. It's a her and him song, and we both sing it together so that she can swear at me, I think. But that is very evocative. Funnily enough, it's almost a silly. It's a beautiful song, but it's something that we've done together. And every time she hears that, when I'm gone, you know, I even now I can feel myself welling up, thinking, "Wow, you know, that's going to be hard for her," but beautiful too. You know, because that song, they play that song at Christmas here every year. It's one of those Christmas songs that you get. So, you know, have that music being for you, you know, as I say, you don't have to play it, but you can still be a part of it, you know, some pieces of music just go through you, don't they, you know, and you become a part of it. Because here's one thing, I used to do anxiety management and hypnosis. One of the things that you mentioned, cathedrals, and I remember a lady who was really in quite an anxious state at one particular, had a family, they all stood on a staircase, it was an very old building, and she was waiting to see a psychiatrist, and they called me over and said, well, you know, she's in a real bit of a state, and she was shaking and quite anxious. So I sat down next to her and I said, did you ever go to a cathedral? And she said, yes, well, yeah, I did. And I said, well, you know, what was that like? Was it empty at the time? And she's having to go inside to start thinking about that. And I said, well, was it cold? You know, did it feel cold when you were in there? And she said, well, a little bit. And I said, what is it? Do you remember, did you ever light a candle? And she said, well, yeah, I was Catholic, and I used to, we used to light the candles and put a penny in the box for the priest. And I said, did you ever snuff the candle out with your fingers, you know, like that? And she said, oh yeah. I said, what did that smell like? And of course, all of these, I'm getting her to go inside and access all these memories. And then I said, well, do you know, most of these churches are really leaky, but can you imagine if a drop of water dropped from the top? Could you do that in slow motion and watch that go down in slow motion and then hit the font and watch the water splash out in slow motion? Of course, you know, it took a bit longer than this, but by the time I finished, she was really chilled out, really relaxed.
Wow.
Because that's a way of helping somebody to reduce their anxiety, because they're focused on all the problems. But if you start to go back on the inside and reconnect with yourself and your memories in a calm place, you can help calm somebody down really quickly. So that is something that we do with music as well. We tend to go, you can get lost in it, can't you? You go into the music and you go inside yourself. I imagine when you're playing, outside here, all of this disappears quite often. You know, you're not looking across at the room, at the audience. You might do, I don't know. But, you know, if you're playing some beautiful piece of music, quite often if I'm playing music or the guitar and I'm singing, I've lost everybody out here. I'm just singing and enjoying it in the moment. And I think that's a really important part of life, enjoy the moment.
Absolutely. So that's really all we have. Like, I talk about time travel in our heads sometimes, and I'll have to use that for anxiety because I sometimes will have anxiety, and I feel like I'm taking my own time machine there. Like, and I can't take anyone with me in that time machine to the future. I can't take anyone with me with my ruminating of the past and thinking of the past, but what I can do is be in the present moment with my family and with my friends, and because that's really what life is. It's in the moment.
And interesting that, you know, you said you get anxious. We all get anxious. You need anxiety, you know. If we didn't have anxiety, walk in front of a bus, wouldn't you? Because you wouldn't be scared of it. So, you know, certain amounts of anxiety are very useful. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's keeping it all in perspective, really, isn't it? And or coming back, because we all lose perspective, especially when the kids come and say, well, I've done something really terrible. What have you done now? You know, and now, how bad is that? Is that going to end the world? No, it probably isn't. You know, so yeah, keeping things in perspective and enjoying the moment.
Absolutely. Now, Jason, you talk about your wife, and I know you mentioned a little bit about her earlier, but she sounds like an amazing person. Can you tell us more about your wife?
Yeah, yes, I can. Talk about her for hours. She's not very tall. That's all I'll say. But she's beautiful. When I first met her, she reminded me of a small elf. That's all I'm saying. Um, and and we met at the theatre company, and I don't think I was 37, I think, when we met. She was 30, and I'd had lots of different relationships over the years, but I don't think I could really settle with anybody because I wanted somebody who wanted to do stuff. Do you know, I didn't want somebody who wanted to just go to work, sit and watch the telly, drink a bottle of wine, whatever, I don't know. But I wanted somebody who was, I always felt I wanted somebody to join me on my journey, if you like, to share, And I think we got that from day one because I was supposed to be her director, so we were doing some little playlets to celebrate the millennium, some little performances, and she had been assigned to my little troupe for the Colchester Theatre Group, I think. And I said, that's pretty bit cheeky. Well, I said, well, I think we'll need to do some rehearsals. And she said, oh, okay then. I said, yeah. So we'll do a reading, and so we could meet at the George and we could do a reading. Of course, none of the other actors turned up because I hadn't invited them. I just my wife. So she turned up, and we just started getting on. That was my way of cheating a date and get on. So we're going to do some rehearsals, and we didn't do any rehearsals at all. But we did fall in love. So she would, every time I wanted to do something crazy, she'd be there right behind me saying, instead of saying, well, do you think that's a good idea? Which she does. And I'll say, well, yeah, it's a great idea. She'll be right there behind me saying, oh, okay, well, let's do that. So she helped me do, start the theatre company and helped every part of that, even, with the acting, sometimes she would step in if we didn't have enough actors. And she was a yes person. She'll say no quite a lot, but actually she's a yes person. She's a yes. I have found over the years that she's so good with the girls, with my girls, our girls. And she is a real nurturing mum. She will get them to take a chance, to take a next step. And she'll also make sure that they've got clean clothes and they're properly dressed, and their manners are well spoken, and she's very good and hot making sure that they are aware of what they should be doing, not necessarily forcing them to do that, but leading them to, by example, behave well. She lets them
That's
fall.
Amazing.
Yeah, she lets them fall as well. So if they, for instance, they get a boyfriend who is a bit out there, she'll say, well, what do you really think? Is it a good idea? And they'll eventually go, no, probably not. Okay. And so she leads not by stick, but more by carrot. And that, I think, is a real amazing character trait for any mum to have, I think. As a dad, I'm there, to just shout and say, what on earth are you bringing this boyfriend into the house for? He's a complete idiot, Get rid of him. Yeah. Where she'll be much more softly, and she'll go up to the room and have a chat with them, whereas I'm just, fire and brimstone. Yeah. So, yeah, she's the bridge. I'm very lucky. My girls, they love both of us. We love them. All families have conflicts, but we don't have that many. Yeah, we're in a really good spot. And I think a lot of that is down to Debbie being the calm person and, saying, right, she's got this brilliant elephant. It's a little cardboard elephant. And so if I get angry with the girls, she will get the elephant out. And then I'll be able to hold the elephant and I'll be able to talk. And then I have to give the elephant to the girls. And the girls then are allowed to talk and I'm not allowed to say anything until they've finished saying their piece, and then I might,
Yeah.
and so we don't have rows and it doesn't all go mad, So she's a great peacemaker, and then we all end up usually having a family hug, oh my God. Oh no, it's been a delight. I've really enjoyed it.
I had so much fun talking with Jason today, and I hope y'all enjoyed our conversation together. If you want to follow Jason on his podcast, the name again is Everything End of Life, and it's available on Spotify. He also will be making it available on other streaming services soon. And to follow my podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, as well as check me out on social media at Valerie_Propsfeld and my website, twomomis2love.com. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks.